Welcome to the guest list and our first crossover lunch and learn. I am Cait Zulewski. I am joined today by Beth MacDonald, Senior Vice President of Strategy and Finance. One thing I do want to say, we were so flattered and honored when RISE, the TMRG for Women and Allies, reached out to us to say, would you consider doing an event for Women's Month and the guest list and kind of do all of these things together? Charlie and I were thrilled and said yes. You may notice that Charlie is not here, and I need to say it's not because he's a man. Charlie is in Atlanta with our client, the Atlanta Braves, this week as they're getting ready for opening day, and he's working on some really neat PR opportunities that we're excited to share with you later. But that is the only reason Charlie is not here. He was disappointed to not be here, and I just wanted to make that fact adamantly clear to all of you. Also, RISE is one of our TMRGs here at Delaware North and has been around for more than 2 years now. Yeah, about 3 years. So thank you so much to Kate Del Gobo and Lizzie Lepertine and Dawn Hedges who had this idea and invited us here today. So we're thrilled to be here. Typically on the guest list, we keep this pretty brief. We try to make them about a 20-minute conversation on a typical topic. This topic is Beth MacDonald. So welcome, Beth. And we're just going to have, just a general conversation. And then when the podcast episode ends, then we will open it up to questions on the chat and in the room for anybody who wants to ask Beth anything. So are you ready to get to it?
I am ready.
Thank you, Beth, for joining us today.
Thank you for inviting me.
So I know you've talked to the RISE Women's Group before, but I think it's been a couple years since you really addressed the group. So why don't we just start, for those of you who don't know my friend Beth MacDonald, tell us a little bit about yourself and your career journey at Delaware North.
So my career journey at Delaware North started about 26 years ago, which does not seem possible that I'm saying that, but my first job out of college was actually at for the Buffalo Sabres at KeyBank Center. I worked in FP&A essentially, but for the Sabres at the time that they were building their new building, and it was a really exciting, fun time to be working with that organization. I was there for about 5 years and then came over to work at Delaware North. I was hired into sports service as an FP&A analyst, which was great. So I had some background and knowledge working for a sports team and then just sort of leveraged that to then learn the concessions business. So FP&A is just a really great career path, I think. In those roles, you are responsible essentially for planning, for forecasting, as well as building pro forma models. So that's what I largely worked on. But the great thing about those positions is you really understand what makes the business work. You are truly building plans, building models. So you really get an understanding of all of the different inputs and how that translates into the financials and the P&L. So I worked in sports service for a long time, and then I will fast forward. I worked in various FP&A roles, I would say, for the large part of my career here, but in different subsidiaries. So along the way, I have supported and worked with almost every subsidiary other than, I think, directly for Patina.
Who's your favorite subsidiary?
No favorite.
Beth told me I was not allowed to ask her difficult questions, so I'm just going to keep firing difficult questions.
Just like my kids, no favorites. Everyone is different in their own special way. So, but yeah, and so I think it's just been a great career path. And along the way, my family and I, for my husband's job, moved to Pittsburgh. I worked remote for, call it 17 years of my 26 years. So that was a significant amount of time, but just always sort of said yes, did different things for the company, but pretty much in that FP&A space. And then fast forward to COVID, and obviously everyone sort of understands what was happening here during that period of time. A lot of individuals were furloughed. Fortunately, I think because of that breadth of experience I had across a lot of subsidiaries and really understanding how the company works and the financial underpinnings, I did stay on to work very closely with Tom Barney and Chris Feeney to work through a lot of the financial implications of COVID, and then ultimately how are we going to get out of that period of time with our banks and covenants and all that. So that was a very intense period of time, but also a very rewarding period of time. I learned a lot. It was, it gave me a lot of visibility. We had, we met weekly with the CEOs during that time to just talk about our cash forecast. So it was, again, very, very challenging, but also very rewarding. Coming out of that then really was the first point I think I moved into the strategy role that I currently hold. And really, I think a lot of what I had done along the way, which probably wasn't that intentional, but ended up really working out for me, was they were looking for an individual inside the organization to pair up with an outside strategy consultant. As we came out of COVID, we were really looking to put strategic plans in place for each of the subsidiaries, which was not a muscle that I would say Delaware North was super strong with at that point. And so they asked me to pair up with the consultant to ultimately help lead us through then preparing strategic plans. So this is how I got to where I am today, with responsibility both for finance as well as the spectrum through to strategy.
So at the risk of embarrassing you, at our global leadership meeting in February, Beth was one of the awardees. We had an award ceremony based on our Delaware North values. And Beth was selected for the Stand Up Award and nominated by our CFO, Chris Feeney. And one thing that really stuck out to me is in Chris's nomination, he really made a point to talk about how over the course of your career, there have been challenging and complex issues, projects, initiatives that have faced Delaware North. And you in particular as a leader have never shied away from those complex issues, going so far as to raise your hand to say, yes, I would like to be involved in tackling this one. So talk to us a little bit about that. Can you think of any of those initiatives that Chris may have been referencing, and what was it about them that drew you to them and compelled you to say, yeah, I want to be involved in this?
Yeah, I mean, I don't like to be bored. I am always, I think, up for a challenge. I find different things interesting. I just like to understand, how does it work? How can we make this work? So I think, like during COVID, that was a very challenging, complex issue that we worked through. That was probably one example. And again, I just think in those times is really when I think you see the most growth personally in myself, especially when I think at that time I a little bit felt like, I was, I had 2 younger children at home, so I was trying to balance working, being a mom and also having a career. So I think along the way made a lot of choices that were probably considered lateral moves, which is a good thing. I know eye roll, people are like, I don't want to do a lateral move. It is important. It will give you breadth, which will become important, as you try to advance your career. But I think one particular, I think being tapped and asked to lead strategy was a lean in moment for me. I would say up to that point, I considered myself more of an individual contributor with probably a smaller group of people to lead, and leading strategy was daunting for sure. At that point, you're being asked to lead each of the presidents. Think about that. Each of the presidents through a strategic planning process, which is hard and it's challenging, and you really need to lean in, and you're constantly being, questioned and challenged, and, you're trying to lead a very diverse group of people, trying to get alignment and trying to, set them on the right path forward. So for me, that was very challenging and daunting, but ultimately very, very rewarding. That group, these leadership teams in the subsidiaries are great to work with, but it's it's challenging. It's hard to wrangle that many different personalities and objectives together.
And just to build on that, and something I hope people recognize, but in case they don't, last summer when we were doing all of our lunch and learns about the subsidiaries and their future strategic plans, those had kind of come out of this initiative that we had coined Investor Day, where all of the subs really laid out their visions for the future. And it was Beth and her team that were really, as she said, like driving behind that, like really working very closely with the subsidiaries to articulate those visions and articulate those plans.
Yes. I mean, I have to say that it was the team that, Gage Lanning, Catherine Sheedy, Swap and Chow, and working with each of those subsidiary leadership teams. It was very much a group effort and, really being driven and led by the subsidiary leadership teams.
Always humble, Beth MacDonald. Okay, you've touched on a couple things that I want to pull on a little bit. First, you've been with Delaware North for 26 years. That's remarkable. I know, actually, I think Delaware North is pretty unique because we do have so many incredible leaders and team members who have been here for a long time, 5, 10, 26 years. But I do think if you look across the spectrum of business and industry, it's not common to spend a quarter of a century with one company. And people often seek opportunities elsewhere in a way to advance their career. You also talked a little bit about the importance of lateral moves. So tell us a little bit, what is the secret to staying at a company like ours for such a long time?
I mean, I think for me, it was just the willingness to say yes. There are always new opportunities. You know that this company does not stand still. We are constantly moving in different directions. So I think the willingness to say yes and do different things is really what's kept me here for 26 years. I continue to feel like I'm getting fulfilling opportunities. So, why would I change? We do really, really cool things. I think we all understand that working for this company, we are in so many different and great places with different locations, different events that we hold. I mean, it's amazing that you don't get that in a lot of other companies. So I think that's been a big piece of it. And then the second piece for me has just been the people that I work with is so critically important to me. I just really, truly enjoy the people that I work with. They're very smart, they're very engaged, they're very committed. And so that in addition to, in that same people category, working for the Jacobs family, that's been important to me. They truly are who they present themselves to be. They are truly good people, smart business people, committed to the communities that they work in. That matters. And that, all of those three things keep you at a company for 26 years. I'm going to put on my RISE hat for a minute. And for those of you who haven't joined a RISE call, I encourage you to. We have really great conversations as a TMRG. One thing that I love about RISE is how inclusive and diverse we are, because sometimes when you're talking to a female executive, the conversation inevitably centers on parenthood. And I am going to ask you a conversation about parenthood, but I do want to emphasize with RISE, we're really good about not only featuring people who are working parents, right? It's a big part of, being a person in business, and it also does not apply to everybody. It doesn't apply to everybody in this room. But you did mention being a working parent, and I want to talk about that a little bit too. So how has being a working parent kind of shaped your leadership style? Has it at all? Yes, I think I am a mother of 2 young 20-year-olds. So back to being humble. There is nothing more humbling than being a mother to 2 20-year-olds that have very candid opinions.
I have an anecdote about that. We took that headshot of Beth. Actually, Kristen, sitting here in the front row, took that beautiful headshot of Beth. And we took a few different options. And Kristen and I gave our recommendations on what we thought was a good headshot. And she was like, I really need my daughters to tell me what looks bad.
They are very critical. Honest. Yes, let's leave it at that. No, I think that maybe not saying working mom, but as a mom, one thing that I think that I was really an aha moment for me is I have 2 daughters that are very, very different people. And I think there was a moment where that really clicked with me of just understanding as a leader that different people need different things. I do not think leadership is a one-size-fits-all. You really need to understand who the different individuals are that you're leading or the organization that you're leading, and really adjust. And I would say being a good listener to, what they're saying, being very thoughtful about then what your actions are, and very deliberate with what you're doing. I would say those things really translated from being a mother and also being a leader in the company.
Wonderful. Can we talk about some non-business related things right now?
Sure.
What do you do? What do you do to relax and unwind when you're not working on complex strategy and finance things for Delaware North?
Lots of things. I do try to exercise, workouts. Maybe I'll say running, but maybe looks a little bit more like fast walking at this point in my life. I think that's very important. That definitely keeps my head clear. So I do enjoy doing things outdoors. I do enjoy reading, not always reading for, I would say reading for pleasure, just to really decompress. I've come down to this system of anything that's more like professional development reading. I now listen on Audible on my way to and from work. So I've sort of done that, but then at night I just try to read like thrillers and, things that are just fun.
You mentioned that you did work, or you worked remotely for Delaware North for a long time because you were living in Pittsburgh, but you recently moved back to Buffalo.
I did.
And so you were born and raised here?
Yes.
Okay, so now that you're back, what are some things that you've noticed that have changed? I know that we all know you were spending every Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday here, even while you were living in Pittsburgh, but now you live here. So what are some things that you've noticed have changed about the area that you grew up in and now have relocated back to?
I think that the biggest thing is just how popular Buffalo has become for a lot of, I don't even know if it's new people coming into the area and realizing how great it is to live here. It is a easy lifestyle, I would say, other than the weather, other than the winter months. But I think people have realized it is a great place to live and raise a family, and it is a very high quality of life to be back here. And I think for me personally, the timing was really good, and I was commuting back and forth probably for close to 2 years, trying to be in the office Monday through Wednesday. That was really my own doing. I worked for Chris Feeney, but he was like, you can manage when you need to be in the office and when you don't. But I just found it very important and very helpful for me to be here, to be with people, to have those types of interactions, whether it's in meetings or just out in, the common day-to-day. So I am very happy to be back.
As a Buffalonian, we're happy to have you back. Okay, so for the podcast portion of our program, that ends our conversation. So Beth, thank you for joining us on the guest list.